you. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. Once upon a time, beyond the trees and mountains that lead all the way down to the sea, is a small town where human stories are valued. Now, I apologise for those of you who are hoping for the whole Jackanory experience. But I'm glad if you were feeling that way, because it shows that you value stories, that you understand at a subconscious level how important they are. Since the dawn of time, human stories have been essential to our very being. They are how we've taught, and they're how we learn. Now, we're living in a time where science fiction is fast becoming science fact. And because of that, we have brain imaging scans that show how our brains react to different stimuli. So if you were attached to a brain scanner this morning, your brain, through hearing this story, the language centres would be lit up, which you might well expect. But it's interesting to note that also, as well as your language centres, the motor cortex responsible for movement would be lit up, as would the sensory cortex responsible for all our senses. So you see, stories really do encompass everything about us and enable our brains to balance. Now, human stories are important and are valuable because we are all valuable, every single one of us. There's not one human being on this planet that doesn't hold value and that isn't important. It doesn't matter what you do and what you haven't done. It's just being here that gives you value. And it's important that we share our stories, because while we're living in a time where we edit and beautify and add to our stories, truth is important. Warts and all versions of our stories, psychologists tell us, can be beneficial because they build resilience and they actually release oxytocin. They thereby increasing our feel-good factor and reducing stress and anxiety. When we share a portion of our story, it enables people to better understand us, thereby increasing empathy. It enables people to feel encouragement through reading something that they will identify with. It helps us to better understand our place in the universe. And it helps us to ask the questions, why are we here? What is the purpose of our being here? So I'm actually here to talk to you about the Humans of Aberystwyth, which is a Facebook project. Now, in 2010, Brandon Stanton began a project photographing humans. He soon realised that, in actual fact, he needed to add words to those pictures so that the story had added value. And he did that. He has gone on to photograph and interview thousands of people, and his project, The Humans of New York, has been emulated in cities around the world. I haven't been able to find any towns that have Humans of projects, but we have. Aberystwyth has a Humans of Aberystwyth project. It began as a bit of banter on a friend's Facebook page. She had moved to Cardiff and posted something called the Humans of Cardiff. And I thought, well, if Cardiff has one, then we should have one. Banter was exchanged between myself and Keith Morris, local photographer, and we decided that we would set up a similar project. So one beautiful sunny morning in September 2014, we wandered along Aberystwyth Promenade and found our official first human of Aberystwyth, who was this lovely lady, Lindy Martin. Now, as it happens, she epitomised for me the ethos of the project. She was full of exuberance and joy at life and the serendipity of it. She had very recently, she's in her 60s, and very recently, when we interviewed her, had just graduated as an artist from the School of Art in Carmarthen. And she was very interested in the Japanese ceramic art forms, and specifically in wabi-sabi, which is centred on the ideas of acceptance and transience and imperfection, and the simplicity and intimacy that can be found in objects, and she intended further studying. She has a successful art art for ceramics business now, and she provides workshops and all sorts of other things for people to enjoy her art and her philosophy. The next person is Aussie Mick. I first met Mick when he was living in a tent in the woods behind Aberystwyth, having literally walked out on his life, firmly believing that everyone in it was better off without him. He spent a lot of time in the town library, and time has a way of enabling the mind to know what the soul needs. Through his time spent not engaging in social media or any sort of technology, but just spending time reading quietly and living hand to mouth through the generosity of various movements in Aberystwyth. He spent time thinking about what to do next. And having found out that the people in his life who he thought were better off without him actually wanted him back in it, he was able to retrieve many of his possessions, and among those possessions were family photographs and his grandfather's World War I diary. So Mick decided that he would follow that diary, and he has spent the last 2 years cycling around Europe, cycling around Belgium and France, visiting the war graves and photographing every Australian who died in the First World War. He's actually also been willing to photograph any other grave for a contribution to his journey, because he left Aberystwyth with £19 in his pocket, and he has managed, through the generosity of others who are interested in the project, to fund the whole journey. He's actually back in Britain and on his way back to Aberystwyth at some point, because he's crowdfunding to release the memoir of his story. So I hope that you have been able to see that stories, all our stories, are important, and that there is value in every single one of them because human beings are valuable. Many of the people that Keith and I approach say, oh, no, you wouldn't want to have me in your story because I don't do anything interesting. But everyone we meet is of interest. Every single person you meet can teach you something new. And the power in their story is because it's their history. Thank you.